Good morning. I'm Yvonne Williams, President of the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome all of our participants today from the business community and our members of the Greater Macon Chamber to our Friday Town Hall series. It's our pleasure to offer this series every Friday in the effort to inform our business community of the very dynamic resources and evolution of activity that's progressing with the COVID-19 recovery and with the re-entry process. Today, we're very pleased to have our chairwoman, Julia Magda, who is with us, who will introduce our very special guest.
Thank you, Yvonne. Happy Friday, y'all. I'm pleased to introduce Scott Hilton, who is the Executive Director of the Georgians First Commission under the Office of the Governor. The Georgians First Commission is laser focused to make sure that Georgia is the best state to do business by streamlining government to make Georgia the best place. An honor graduate of Georgetown University with an MBA from Emory University, Scott spent a career in commercial banking at a regional financial institution, providing small businesses with valuable capital needed to fund growth. I'm sure you don't miss those days right now with all of these PPP, EIDL. Yeah. Scott also served as a state representative in the Georgia General Assembly. And during his tenure, he got tapped as in a leadership role to be the deputy whip, and was recognized as Legislator of the Year by numerous organizations. Scott's also active in his local community, having served in a variety of roles, including President of the Peachtree Corners Civic Association, President of the Amberfield Homeowners Association, and Fundraising Chair for the Fowler Family YMCA. He's a graduate of Leadership Georgia, Conservative Policy Leadership Institute, and Lead Atlanta. He served as chairman of the Gwinnett County SPLOST Citizens Project Selection Committee and treasurer of the Atlanta Down Syndrome Association. Scott and his wife Meredith have 3 children, and they are active members of the Perimeter Church in Johns Creek, Georgia. We welcome you, Scott, and thank you for spending Friday with us.
Julia, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm glad you mentioned the 3 children as part of the introduction. You'll probably see 1 or 2 of them run down these stairs here during the Zoom meeting, so I'll go ahead and apologize for that in advance. But it's great to be with everyone here virtually. This seems to be our new environment right now. I can't wait for the day that we get to see each other again in person. I don't know if the future holds shaking hands again, but I hope we get back to that here pretty soon. So want to thank everyone for taking the time to join on this call today. I know we find ourselves in interesting times and wanted to give everyone an update on a couple fronts. So number one, wanted to talk through all the reopening process that we're going through right now, answer any questions you may or may not have toward that end, talk through some of the resources that are available for small business, give an update on PPP, some of the SBA programs, and then walk through the Georgians First Commission. So Yvonne has been an excellent partner, and Julia too, welcoming us down to Macon and Central Georgia, Middle Georgia several times, and we appreciate that. I'll give you a brief high level about Georgians First, who we are and why we exist. So to the governor's credit, about a year ago when he first got sworn in, he had the foresight to create a commission designed all around helping small business. So it was almost prophetic in a way. You know, you look forward a year and small business needs help now more than ever. And so our commission, which is comprised of 18 small business owners from all across the state, have been working nonstop over this last year to find best practices from other states on how we can reduce regulation and help small business here in the state. So we've come up with a set of recommendations that we're ready to deliver to the governor now that really focus on streamlining government and figuring out ways to either reduce taxes, help with licensing, everything we can do for small business. So today, though, I wanted to take a few minutes just to walk everyone through where we were, the measured reopening process that the governor's following, and then where we're going over the next few weeks here. And so we'll go back to, I believe it was 2nd of April, April 3rd, when the governor first declared a shelter at home order and mandated that some businesses and industries close down. And so at the time, those were sort of high touch type industries. Think about kind of your nail salons, haircut place, restaurants, gyms, things like that, large venues where people gather. All those were encouraged by the health experts to go ahead and close down. I'll tell you, a majority of businesses were allowed to remain open during that time and did remain open in some form of fashion. While they were allowed to remain open, a lot of them had restrictions or guidelines that the state issued to make sure that they were abiding by all the rules in place. And so we went through that till about last Friday when the governor allowed some industries to begin to reopen again. I know I've gone and got my haircut now. I know many of you probably have. That industry, tattoo, massage, and others have allowed to reopen under, again, a lot of restrictions in place. And so typically at this point, I'd share with you the screen, but if you were to go on and look at the executive order that the governor issued last Thursday and Friday, there's about 20 restrictions that all businesses are required to follow minimum standards of operation. In conjunction with that, those sort of high-touch industries, there's additional restrictions and guidelines that we've issued for them to adhere to as well. That was last Friday, and then this Monday, in dining in restaurants was allowed to reopen as well. As an update on the shelter in place, that expired yesterday at midnight. We have extended the shelter in place order for those that are over 65 and have pre-existing health conditions that put them in an at-risk category. For everyone else, the shelter in place has expired. And so the only real industries and businesses that are still ordered to be closed under the current order are those kind of large concert venues, bars, nightclubs, and public pools. So again, try to avoid large gatherings of people there. So that's where we stand today. I'll tell you what we're seeing from a ground level is kind of a cautious, measured approach of people that are reopening. Some businesses have made the business decision that they're going to remain closed just because customer traffic is not back yet to where they need it to be profitable. Some businesses have reopened and actually gone above and beyond kind of the minimum standards that the state has recommended. And then some are kind of weighing the decision, plan to kind of pause a little bit and reopen in a few weeks. A lot of them, frankly, need time to reorganize how they're structured. I know there's a local restaurant we love going to it all the time, and I was talking with them yesterday, and they're changing to a reservation model where they bring in a certain number of folks at a time and then let them go kind of clean and bring folks in. So a lot of businesses are going above and beyond to give consumers the confidence to go back in and begin shopping again. So with that, I'll kind of pause for a second here to see if there's any initial questions on the measured reopening that we've announced thus far. I know there are a handful of other states who have kind of followed our lead and are beginning that reopening process and the expiration of the shelter in place. All of the decisions that we've made thus far are really based on a lot of data that we've received from public health, and we get stuff literally on a minute-by-minute basis, updates, and making decisions based off of that. So I want to pause for a second and see if there's any initial questions, Yvonne, that come up.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I have some questions that came in before the production, so I wanted to share those with you that would relate to your great comments. In your caution or your thoughts, when people are starting to go forward with reopening, where can they go for like a central point of information that they can utilize to sort of stage how they plan to reopen and how they plan to adhere to the policies or the recommendations for safety?
Great question. So I'll tell you, even prior to COVID-19, our commission was looking at, for small business owners, time is literally money, and you don't have the luxury to spend hours on end kind of searching the web for resources. So I'll tell you, from a commission recommendation standpoint, we've been developing a one-stop shop business site where all the tools and resources that the state and feds may offer are all under one umbrella. To answer your question, I'd tell you the Georgia Department of Economic Development right now is the best site I've seen. If you just Google Georgia Economic Development, they've got a tab there, COVID-19, and literally it spells out for your business, here are the minimum basic operations you need to follow. And then for specific industries, here's what you got to do above and beyond. So I would encourage folks, if you have any questions, go check that out. And also toward that end, Yvonne, I'll email you
Exactly.
your membership materials as well.
Also, as employers are looking to the benefit of their employees, what are some of the ways that they can safely think about procedures and policy processes for supporting their employees coming back to work?
Yeah, so want to touch on that real quick, because this has been one of the sources of misinformation that I've seen out there. There's been a lot of potential concern that by reopening, a lot of employees who maybe didn't feel comfortable going back or went back but under kind of reduced hours may or may not be eligible for unemployment benefits. I'd tell you that's not the case. They still are eligible for those. So if you are an employer or an employee who decides it's not the right environment right now, you are still eligible to receive those. And so I'll send out more information on that as well. Or if you're an employee who we've heard a lot from folks in the restaurant industry who are underemployed because they're just not making the same tips and activity as before, you would still have access to those benefits as well. So no cause for concern there. Like I said, the state has outlined some basic minimum operations that you, the employer, must do and also offer for your employee as well. So for example, if an employee comes in and has a temperature above 100.4, they're advised to be sent home and also have to be provided with masks and a few other things. And so you'll find all that spelled out. But yeah, there's certainly protections in place for our employees who are going back to work.
Great. Well, obviously you're looking at data from across the state, and obviously areas would have hot spots more than maybe some of the other areas. With your focus on data, what can you share with us that we would be cautious about within certain regions of the state, and then those that are become more open and available towards getting back to business? And particularly in Central Georgia, have you seen any indicators recently that would be beneficial for us to know?
Yep. So I would highly encourage everyone on this call, if you haven't done so already, Georgia Department of Health, DPH, has issued or updated their dashboard on their public website, and it's fantastic. I'm kind of a numbers geek and like to nerd out on data, and it presents it to you in a very digestible format. So I'd encourage you, again, Google Georgia Department of Public Health. You'll see their dashboard on there. It's really slick. And you can actually pinpoint down to the county and kind of click on each of our 159 counties, see what their infection rate is, how many cases, how many deaths, and it gives you a really good picture or snapshot as to where some of the trouble areas still exist and what the trend line shows us. And so I would encourage you to check that out if you're looking for all the updated data. It's updated twice a day with the latest numbers, so go check that out.
Obviously, the Chambers of Commerce were not very well supported in the PPP program, especially under the CARES Act. 501c6 organizations were not eligible for the funding, but we're hoping that there's going to be a phase 4 package of which that can become an opportunity for opening up more resources for organizations that do in fact support small business and are actually the lifeline for helping support businesses long term. Do you have any thoughts about how advocacy could weigh in, or what we could do on a state level to begin to think about resources with chambers and their ability to serve the vast constituency of small business?
Yeah. I'd encourage everyone, and it's worked, right? So you've seen it. The first round of PPP from the CARES Act, the $349 billion, all of it went out in 10 days. A lot of it to small business, but we've certainly seen some issues with that initial round of the program, and those were raised pretty quickly, where we saw money go to organizations who were clearly not in that small business category, and that feedback got back to our federal elected officials, who then made changes with the second round of the program. And so, yeah, if you're on this call today, I'd encourage you to reach out to your state leaders, but more importantly, your federal leaders as well. So, and I know both our senators, Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, have done a fantastic job of advocating for small business and really making sure that changes were made to the second round of PPP to make sure it went to specifically to small business and not organizations like Harvard or or whoever. So, but yeah, there's a continued need out there. You mentioned the chambers. I think we're going to see some struggle from the state. Obviously, is going to see a big hit to our revenue. The municipalities, your local cities, Macon and others, are going to see a hit to their budgets too. And so there will be probably another relief package coming out of DC toward that end to help kind of support our state and local governments so that they can continue to deliver the services to support constituents.
Thank you. That brings me to the question about the state legislature getting back to session, which they will probably make that happen in the very near future, obviously. What do you see as any kind of legislative reform or support for small business now that we've been through the first part of the pandemic, and now that we have a legislative session to make some decisions on policy?
I'll tell you what a year for the General Assembly, right? It's amazing to think that just 2 months ago, we were talking about things like tax cuts and teacher pay raises, all good things. We now find ourselves in a very different posture than we did just a couple months ago. I'll tell you, the good news is about the General Assembly, under conservative leadership, we've done the right thing over the last 10 to 20 years and saved, and our rainy day fund is close to $2.8 billion, which is going to allow a state like Georgia to navigate through this a lot better than a New York and Illinois or a California, who is reliant now on the funds from the federal government and really only has about 2 weeks of cash flow in the bank. So whereas we're going to see a pretty big hit, and the General Assembly is going to have to make some tough decisions when they come back, those decisions aren't going to have to be as difficult given the solid financial position we find ourselves in. The word we're hearing, and it hasn't been solidified yet, it appears June 11th is the date that the General Assembly is targeting to return. I imagine they won't be back for too long. I think just long enough to get a budget in place and do a few other things to help support small business. I know one of the big questions that I've received from small businesses around liability, right? So consumer goes into your location, and we live in a very litigious society right now. If they somehow contract it, is your business or location eligible to be sued or against? And so that may be one of the issues we deal with. But then also, what are some supports and things that we can pass as a General Assembly, whether it be a job tax credit or some sort of program to help small businesses? I know they'll be taking all those under consideration.
Well, thank you. We've got time now for some parting comments if you would like to make any while we're here, Scott. And again, you've been such a great resource in the short time we've had the Georgians First Commission. You've been to Macon, I know, at least 3 to 4 times to meet with our chamber, and that's been a welcome partnership, which we want to maintain for the long term, obviously. So if you have any parting comments, we'd appreciate that opportunity at this point.
Well, I'll tell you. So, right, the governor has been a small business owner his entire career, and so he knows what it's like to literally put everything up on the line to start and run your business. And so that's where his heart is. He is absolutely feeling for our folks out there right now who are struggling, who literally have no money coming in the door and are trying to decide between paying the energy bill, the rent bill, or feeding their family. And so he understands those pressures that everyone's under. And he's looking to balance that with taking a measured reopening process. His big focus right now, and you'll hear the governor talk about this, is all around testing, right? So we want to get as many people tested as possible to give us data to help us get around this curve here. I'll tell you, we've got 65 test sites located all throughout the state. We can test upwards of 4,000 people a day. Some tests are as quick as 30 minutes. So again, I think he'd like to see that number even more, but we're looking good in terms of number of hospital beds and availability, the number of tests that we're issuing. But you have a leader in the governor who is absolutely passionate about small business. It is the backbone of Georgia's economy. And so anything that we can do for you from a state level, please let us know. We want to help you in your business as much as humanly possible during this time we're in right now.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. We want to invite you back. We know there'll be several opportunities to have you come back and join us with further updates, and we welcome that opportunity. The Chamber is very grateful for your sharing the resource information, which we will put on our COVID resource page and make sure that our Central Georgia business community is updated with this great new, relevant information that our businesses can have resources to use while they're doing the good thing and the right thing for the community. And we just applaud the fact that Central Georgia is a very strong economic hub for the state, a medical hub, an employer hub, and a transportation hub. And we know that that's going to be a very big value as you consider the policies and opportunities to connect resources back to Central Georgia. And for that, we're very thankful. I want to thank the audience for being with us today. We applaud your feedback. We hope you'll visit the resource page and make sure that you're up to date in this environment that we're in about recovery coming back. And we know that we're greater together. So stay safe and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone.